Hi, my name is Ken Cerny with Leader Team Dynamics. You might recognize me from my talks that I've been doing for about the last 10 years or so at the AMTC, at Heli-Expo, the Wisconsin EMS Association, and other places about helicopter safety, decision-making process, personalities, and risk. Those are some of the topics that I've covered at some of those locations, so you may recognize me from one of those. Today I'm doing a video to introduce myself, but not only introduce myself, but also introduce what I have coming up. So like I said, my name is Ken Cerny, the owner of Leader Team Dynamics, but I've been a full-time helicopter pilot, first in the Army, and then in the helicopter air ambulance community. All of that. And started talking about personalities and how our personality conflicts in the crew can get us into trouble. Well, instead of talking about accidents and what has happened, what I'd like to do is start a new podcast, a video podcast, that talks about the things that I learned over the years, that other people have learned over the years, and some of the things that we could possibly share with the community to keep them from getting into an accident, because they are doing some of the same things that we did in our day. I call it the Icarus tales. The reason I call it the Icarus tales is these are stories and lessons on surviving our egos as helicopter pilots. Now, if you don't know anything about the story of Icarus, he and his father, Daedalus, were trying to escape from a prison. Daedalus built these wings, usually made or held together by beeswax, but he warned his son Icarus not to fly too close to the sun, or they might melt and he would be killed. Well, of course, his ego got the better of him. As with a lot of pilots, our egos can get the better of us. Obviously, that's a Greek myth. However, the concept is not so unusual. So the concept of the Icarus tales is about stories. It's about not so much myths, but our stories of what we have done in the past. Stories about going too far as a helicopter pilot. So these are stories about going too far. These are stories about getting ourselves into trouble. These are stories about getting ourselves out of trouble. So sometimes we get ourselves into trouble, and sometimes the same egos that we have, those same personalities that we have, can get ourselves out of trouble. Have you ever scared yourself? I know I have. And it wasn't something that I was trying to do. It's just something that suddenly I found myself in a position where I shouldn't have been. And I knew about it a little bit ahead of time, but I didn't stop there. I pushed a little bit too far. These are stories that hopefully others will be able to learn from. So I'm going to tell some of my stories about things that I have done and things that I've learned the hard way. These are what I used to call the good mistakes. The only reason that they're good is because I'm here to talk about them. And now I can make an example of my stupidity sometimes, and hopefully keep other people from doing the same thing. And lastly, if you do help me out, and if you do share some of your stories, you need to be able to share stories that you're willing to let everybody hear, because obviously they're going to be on the internet. So secondly, I want to bring out the ego. Carl Jung talks about the ego and his work in personality types, personality assessments, personality psychology, basically. So the psychological types, or the personality types that you hear a lot about, we're going to talk about those also. I do have a big background in looking at personality types, from the Myers-Briggs type indicator to the risk type compass and everything in between. We'll be talking about some of that. We'll talk about how those egos, how your personality got you into that trouble. We'll talk about how those personalities, how that ego got you out of that trouble. We'll talk about sometimes using hazardous attitudes, even though that may not be what you think your hazardous attitude is. Why do we think things differently? Why do we do things differently? Why is our ego, why is our personality different from others? And yet, why is it the same? Different ways of looking at your personality and how you use it and get into it. We're going to also look at risk and stress and decision making. These are topics that I have been talking about a lot lately. I did some research using the risk type compass with helicopter pilots and air medical crew members. And I want to bring some of that knowledge out. I want to talk about some of that, both with somebody else in the podcast and on my own, to bring out again some of those stories, some of that knowledge that I've been sharing with just those people who showed up at the conferences, but with everybody who might be interested. In 1985, I was looking at just getting my flight suits, and here we are, 4 lieutenants. We're pretty much indestructible in those days. And this Apache shows up in May of 1985. Happens to be the first Apache to show up at Fort Rucker to start training a new breed of aircraft pilots, the Apache pilots. And so we just knew that we could do everything. It's that attitude that can get you through things. It can also get you into trouble. So what am I looking for? I'm looking for volunteers. I'm looking for volunteers with stories and a desire to learn and to talk about their own personalities and share our knowledge with others. I'm looking for ideas and questions to pursue on risk, on risk tolerance, as a matter of fact, and risk taking, on pilot personalities, and on personality conflicts within the crew. How does a crew work? This actually was an area that I was working with the U.S. Helicopter Safety Team. I'll talk more about that at some point. But they were looking at how non-rated crew members can help identify risk, help get that information to the pilot so that they can make a good decision to minimize that risk or to prevent that risk becoming something worse. And although this is mainly about pilots, I'll tell you what, some of the people that I've worked with over the years, especially the mechanics and the non-rated crew members, could really take advantage of this also. They are a part of the crew, whether we like it or not, whether we think about it or not. Without the mechanics, we're not flying. Without the crew in the back, we have no need to fly. They have a vested interest in our safety and our being able to come back. This is what I'm trying to do. And when we look at doing this kind of work, and we look at this kind of a podcast, I think we have a lot to share with the younger generations. That's another whole area, just age. I'm getting to the point where I'm starting to look at my retirement. And as a matter of fact, this might be some of my retirement. I'm not ready to stop talking. I'm not really ready to stop helping people to not kill themselves. So if you're willing to help me out, I would appreciate it. You'll be able to contact me. I'll have my contact information in the description. And I look forward to talking to more of you in the future. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for taking the time. And I appreciate any help you can give me in the future. Oh, and by the way, subscribe. So once you find my YouTube channel, please subscribe. Like the videos that you like, and we'll get this thing rolling as fast as possible. Thank you very much for your help. Have a good day. Bye.